Hey, what's up everyone? My name's Oscar and I basically just finished walking 800 plus kilometers across northern Spain. I did the GR11 trail, which goes across the Spanish Pyrenees. And in this video, I'll be going over all the gear that I took with me, what items worked, what didn't, and what items I'll be changing for my next big thru hike. If you haven't seen my full gear list video where I basically went over all the items that I took with me on this thru hike, I'll link out to it over here. Also, if you haven't seen the thru hike, I basically made a video series of the whole trip, so you can also check it out over there. And yeah, I'll also be linking out to all the items that I took with me down in the video description, so make sure to check it out if you're interested in that. So let's start with the backpack itself. And I chose the Osprey Talon 44, which I've owned like for over a year now, I think almost 2 years now. Let's start with this thing. It's the trekking pole holder, and it's basically just this string that's attached to this strap, and you can hold your trekking pole there, or I kept my camera tripod there, which is pretty heavy, and I think this is meant only for trekking poles. So yeah, it started tearing apart and I had to use some tape just to fix it. I mean, it works, but it doesn't look pretty in my opinion. Another thing that started happening is this thing over here. Basically this drawstring that closes the main compartment started like tearing apart a bit. Also not a big problem, but yeah. So overall, I think I'm pretty happy with this choice of backpack, but for my next thru hike, I'll probably be looking into something ultralight because this backpack weighs 1.1 kilogram. It's definitely on the lighter end of backpacks because I saw like a lot of people like carrying 20 kilos on their backs with like 70-liter backpacks, which were much heavier. So this definitely was lightweight, but I think I want to lose some weight on my next thru hike. So yeah, I could easily like save 500-600 grams on a new ultralight backpack. But other than that, I have nothing bad to say about this backpack. It performed really well, was very comfortable. It offered like enough space for everything. Yeah. A good choice overall. Next, let's talk about where I stayed in the night, basically. So for the first 2 weeks when I was hiking together with my girlfriend, I bought this 2-person Best Sport tent, which is pretty heavy actually. It's 2.3 kilograms, I think. And for the rest of the hike, I was using this ultralight tent, which is the REI Flash Air 1, which weighs, I think, 700 grams. So like 1/3 of what this tent weighs. On my next thru hike, I'll probably also be hiking with my girlfriend. So I definitely need to find a lighter 2-person tent. So that's something I'll definitely be looking into it. And another thing, this tent is like bright orange and this one is like camouflaged. Like you can't really see it from distance. Even like from 20 meters, it's pretty hard to see this tent. But this tent, you can see like from kilometers away. And in the Pyrenees, that's a bad thing because in the GR11, you go through many different regions, and each region has like different rules on where and how you can set up your tent. And I think in some parts you like weren't allowed to camp, basically. I would advise getting like something that isn't sticking out. So yeah, my next 2-person tent will definitely be much lighter and it won't be in bright colors, definitely. And as for this tent, I couldn't be much happier with this choice. I'll definitely be using it on my next thru hike as well if I'll be hiking solo. Yeah, it's definitely very ultralight. It's like one of the lightest tents that you can get on the market, and it's also pretty cheap. I have a review on this tent actually, so you can check it out somewhere there. Overall, it's a really nice tent. It packs down very small. I didn't bring this pack that comes with it, so I was available to save some weight. It's a trekking pole tent, so I didn't need to also bring the poles, also saved some weight, and in the end, I think it weighed like 600 grams, which is nothing really. The only thing that I don't like about this tent is that it did soak up a lot of condensation, especially if I was building it next to a lake or somewhere where it was a bit wet. Basically, you'd wake up and like you'd see these puddles even sometime on the ground. So my sleeping bag, my sleeping pad, and as well as the tent was a bit wet basically every morning. But it dries very quickly, and honestly, like I woke up at maybe 6 or 7, and at 10 I decided each morning to make some coffee and make my breakfast, and I could just lay it all out and everything dried within 15 minutes. So that's not a big problem. Overall, very happy with this choice, and I'll definitely be using it on my next thru hike as well. Next, let's talk about my sleeping bag. So I went with a sleeping bag that's rated for comfort -2 and extreme -7 degrees Celsius, I think, or -9. And I think it was definitely an overkill for the GR11. I could have bought something that was a bit lighter and, you know, not that warm. Because most of the nights I basically unzipped the sleeping bag and I slept with it open because it was too hot for me. Next, let's talk about my sleeping pad and my ass pad. So basically I brought with me the REI Flash Thermal sleeping pad with an R value of 4.7. This is basically an inflatable winter sleeping pad and it weighs 600 grams. And it definitely was an overkill for the Pyrenees. I'd say that for the GR11, at most you need an R value of 3 if you're like walking in the summer months, basically, which is July, August, and even September. And I also bought with me this cheap Decathlon foam pad. I cut a piece of it just so I can sit on this thing like on whenever I pause and take a break. On my next through hike, I will be switching from an inflatable pad to a foam pad with an R value of hopefully 2. And I think that should be more than enough for the Pyrenees. The first reason why I'm switching is because I will be saving a lot of weight, probably like 400 or 500 grams. The second reason is that I won't need to bring an additional ass pad because I'll just be attaching it to the outside of my backpack and I can just take it out whenever I pause, do some stretching on there, some exercises, sit on it if the grass is like too dirty or too wet. And yeah, that's one thing that I'll definitely be switching on my next through hike. The next item on the list is water and food. So when I was preparing for this hike, I thought that I would be bringing 2 1.5 liter bottles, so 3 liters in total. But I ended up switching to 2 2-liter bottles, so 4 liters in total. In my Q&A video, I told that you don't really need a water filter because you're going through towns and cities basically almost every day. But once you got over through Andorra, I think right after the main capital of Andorra, basically the water sources started to become a bit scarcer. So you weren't able to find good like filtered water every day. So I had to filter some water, and also in some places there weren't actually that many streams available. So that's why I switched to 4 liters in total, and I actually ended up using my water filter quite a lot. So that's something that you definitely need to bring if you're walking the GR11. One thing that I hadn't noticed before is that Spain actually doesn't use a normal thread for their regular water bottles. So if you're going in a store and you're buying water, this water filter won't screw on because, you know, they use a different kind of thread, which is like a bit wider. So that's why I ended up actually buying a bottle of Coca-Cola, drinking it all, and then like I used it for filtering my water because I didn't bring an additional pouch. One tip that I gained from one of my subscribers who commented it on my previous video is that you don't need to bring a full syringe for backflushing this water filter. You can basically just buy a sports cap in any store. So what you do is you screw it on here, you put clean water here, then you press it against the water filter and it works the same way as a backflushing syringe. So yeah, it saves a bit of space and a bit of weight. And as for food, I'll be posting another dedicated video to what kind of food I ate like while I was through hiking. So make sure to watch out for that. It will also include some of my favorite recipes. The next item on this list is clothing, and let's start with socks. So these are the Silverlight socks, which are pretty expensive actually. And I bought the smaller pair and the larger pair, and I basically did the full through hike with just these 2 pairs of socks. And let me tell you, they were amazing. I'll be posting a review, a dedicated review just on these socks because they were so great. I didn't get a single blister. They were like extremely comfortable. Yeah, I'm just in love with these socks. And I know it sounds weird, but I am in love with these socks. Now let's talk about these shoes. I bought these pretty cheap trail runners on Decathlon for 56 euros, I think. These are the Avedict MT2 trail runners, and they worked really great, but they weren't meant for a through hike that long. I don't want to reveal too much because I'll be posting another dedicated review just on these shoes, but just so you know, they aren't meant for 800 kilometers, they're meant for maybe 500 kilometers. Yeah, so wait until that dedicated review comes out and you can find out more about them then. These are the Valoon sunglasses, and I also have to mention them because they're so great. I bought them because I watched a video from Chase Mountains. Also, the socks, I got the idea from him. But basically, these sunglasses are freaking amazing. I love them. I'm using them all the time. And, you know, before I bought these ones, I like switched to a new pair of sunglasses like every few months because I would honestly just break them because I'm not too good with sunglasses. I lose them, I break them, but these ones, they're perfect. Like, you can do this and nothing happens with them. The only thing that I don't like about them is this mirrorless coating. Like, I don't know if you'll be able to tell, but yeah, some of the mirrorless coating has started to scratch off. So the next time I would be buying these sunglasses, I would be buying them without the mirrorless coating. But other than that, they're great. They look good. You know, the tint on them is pretty perfect as well, in my opinion. It's not too dark or too bright, which is, it's like perfect for mountains. And yeah, I love them. I just love them. Now let's talk about my choice of t-shirts. So I bought this fully merino wool t-shirt and this regular polyester t-shirt. Both are from Decathlon. This one was like €3 and this one was €20. So I didn't get two merino wool t-shirts because I thought that merino wool would be too like warm for 25-30 degrees, but honestly it wasn't, and I ended up just using this t-shirt most of the time, and also it looked better in my opinion. So on my next through hike I'll definitely be getting two merino wool t-shirts. Like, this one also started to develop bad odors around the armpits pretty quickly, and this one didn't. So yeah, if you're doing a through hike, just get two merino wool t-shirts. You'll be glad that I gave you this tip basically. Next thing that I bought is I didn't bring a fleece jacket, like which I bring on most of my hikes here in Latvia. Instead, I bought this down jacket together with a rain jacket. And honestly, it was perfect. Like, at no point was I cold, even when it was -3 degrees and it was snowing. Like, I was perfectly warm the whole trip. And in terms of clothing, I'd say that everything was basically correct. Yeah, and I haven't talked about this rain jacket much before. It's the Marmot's Precip rain jacket, and I've owned it for a while. And honestly, I think it's my new favorite rain jacket. It's also one of the lightest ones that I own, not counting the Frog Togs one. So I'll be making a dedicated review for this rain jacket as well. So when I was preparing, I thought that I would need this North Face beanie, which is very warm. And you know, when you're in the mountains, if it's cold, if it's windy, if it's snowing, then you need a beanie, right? But yeah, it turns out that you didn't, actually. I ended up just using this cap and nothing else. Like, if you put on this cap, if you put on this down jacket, which has a hood, and the rain jacket, you're perfectly warm on your head and you don't need a beanie. So on my next through hike, I'll be definitely leaving this beanie back home because it also weighs pretty much. But one thing that was needed is gloves. You definitely needed gloves. And actually, I hiked with one guy who didn't bring any gloves, and he was complaining about that for a bit. You know, if it's windy, if it's rainy, you're constantly using the trekking poles, right? And, you know, you're warm, but your hands aren't because they're exposed to the elements, and you definitely need gloves. So that's something that I'll definitely be bringing on my next hike in the mountains. And lastly, I wanted to talk about these cheap Decathlon running shorts, which cost, I think, €4. I mean, they're perfect. They're like, they don't take up any space, literally any space. They don't weigh anything. They're extremely comfortable. And, you know, I've walked with them for so long and they still look good, in my opinion, at least. So, you know, if you're in Decathlon, I don't know the model, but these ones, yeah, they're definitely a good purchase. And I think I'll be using them on my next through hike as well. By the way, I didn't bring any long trekking pants on my through hike. I just bought these shorts together with my thermal bottoms, basically. And whenever it was too cold outside or in the evenings, I had to take off my shorts, put on the thermal bottoms, and then put these shorts on again. And I was very warm during the whole trip basically. And yeah, in my next thru hike, I'll be using the same system instead of bringing like rain pants or trekking pants or something like that. Now I'll cover some other random items that I think I'll be changing on my next hike. So I bought with me this Cicerone guidebook, which weighs 300 grams. And you know, all the ultralight hikers will probably be looking at me pretty weird, I think, because, you know, 300 grams, you can just have this on your phone, right, in a PDF version. And you can actually. I think on my next hike, I might be bringing this one, but I might be not. Like, I'm not fully sure yet. I really liked having this one, but it's pretty heavy. Whenever I stopped, I could just take out this book and I always had something to do and I didn't have to use my phone and use up the battery all the time. I could like look up where I'm going next, when will the next water sources be, like what altitude do I still need to do, where I'll be able to sleep, where's the next city and so on. Like you could do that on the phone, but then you would be stopping all the time and like using your phone, which honestly, I think I wouldn't want to do. So I have to figure out whether I want to save some weight and use only my phone, or I'll be getting a new guidebook for my next thru hike. We'll see on the next hike, I guess. The next thing that I think I want to switch or maybe save some weight on is my pocket knife. This is basically a regular Swiss Army knife, which has a knife, scissors, tweezers to pull out ticks. I actually used it, and a cork opener, which is pretty useful in Spain where wine is so cheap. But yeah, there is, I think, a smaller model which like weighs, I think, 30 grams less. So I might be buying that instead and saving some weight, because also this is pretty big in my opinion. Next item, garbage bags. I did buy these garbage bags, which are like 5 or 10 liters, and I thought I will be using them because like where I'll be putting my garbage, but it turns out that I didn't need them and I didn't use them once because, you know, you don't leave that many trash, because whenever you're in a city, what I did is I unpacked like most of the packaging and put everything in Ziploc bags, and I threw out most of the packaging already, and I ended up with just a little bit of packaging which you could like put in all the pockets of your backpack, and you didn't need to use these garbage bags. Even if you were hiking for like 3 days without a city, like there's enough room in your backpack for all the garbage basically. So on a thru hike, you don't really need these. Next thing that I added, this was like a last minute thing that I decided to bring, is a small notepad with a pen. And honestly, I will be bringing it again because this meant that I didn't need to use my phone. Like I wrote down what I'll need to remember to buy the next time I'm going through a town. Like I wrote down all of my video ideas here, all of my gear mistakes, what I want to be changing on my next thru hike and so on. And honestly, this was a very useful thing and I'll definitely be bringing it the next time. One thing that I'll definitely be changing is I sorted everything. I put all of my sleeping gear and clothing in this larger dry sack, and then I organized all of my other items in these smaller ones. And altogether, I think they weigh 300 grams. And I think you don't really need to do that. You can just get like one large liner, such as the Osprey, which I have this one, which is like 30 to 50 liters, and put everything in there. Like you don't need to organize everything, because like whenever I stopped, I had to take out most of my pack outside and put everything on the ground anyway. Like it gets messy when you're like hiking for so long and you know, you're not really that organized, and you don't need to organize everything in different sacks. So for my next thru hike, I'll be either be using this large dry sack, which weighs, I think, 200 grams, or maybe I'll look into buying something even lighter, which weighs maybe 50 to 100 grams. But you definitely do need a dry sack because, you know, backpacks, they aren't fully waterproof, even if they say they are. So you need to protect your gear, especially your electronics, your sleeping gear as well. So you definitely need something waterproof inside your backpack. So if you watched my videos on the second part, I think you notice that I broke my trekking pole, and I had pretty expensive trekking poles, the Black Diamonds aluminum trekking poles, which cost like over 100 euros. And honestly, I was pretty bummed that they broke. Basically, they got stuck between two rocks when I was walking downhill, and yeah, one just snapped near the mechanism where it locks. Luckily, my girlfriend also had trekking poles, which were like twice as heavy, but you know, they worked. They were trekking poles, and I needed trekking poles. So when she flew away, she gave me hers, and like I could finish the hike with cheaper, like heavier trekking poles. And honestly, they worked really well. So I think that on my next through hike, I'll be definitely getting cheaper trekking poles. Like you don't need to spend that much on them if they continue breaking, basically. So I'll be getting cheaper aluminum trekking poles, something from Amazon, and I'll let you know how they work out, basically. But for the GR11, you definitely do need trekking poles, because when you're walking downhill, you're saving your knees. When you're walking uphill, it's much easier. Also, you aren't working only your legs. When I started using them daily, I could feel like my wrists especially becoming stronger, and yeah, like these muscles definitely became bigger after I finished the hike. Also, yeah, I use them for my tent. You know, you can scare away animals if you want to feel protected. You definitely do need trekking poles if you're hiking in the mountains. One thing that I do want to add to my kit basically is an emergency SOS device. Like, I was lucky enough that I didn't need to use one on this hike, but you know, everything could happen. And actually, I was following one girl on Instagram, and she potentially saved her life because of the SOS device, like the Garmin Mini or something she had. Like, she basically saved her life because she was caught in a thunderstorm, and you know, things got really bad and she needed to ditch. And luckily she had the GPS device, and you know, rescue came with a helicopter, rescued her and so on. So that's something that costs a lot. Like, they don't come cheap. I think they're like 300 euros or something. But for my next through hike, I'll definitely be adding an SOS device. Now let's talk about my camera gear and electronics. So for my power bank, I went with the Xiaomi Redmi 20,000 milliamp hour power bank. It weighs, I think, 300 grams. And on my next through hike, I will be also bringing this power bank because I'm filming all the time and I needed the electricity, basically. If you wouldn't be filming your hike, I'd say that you probably could live with maybe 10,000 milliamp hours, but I needed 20,000. So it's heavy, but I definitely need it. And on my next through hike, I will be bringing it as well. Now, one last minute change was that I didn't bring the splitter, electricity outlet splitter, which I showed you in my last video. I remembered that I have this thing, which is like multi-use adapter. Like, basically it has all kinds of different ways you can set it up. You can use it in most countries. I used just this one. So you plug it in, and you can also plug in another charger for your phone. For instance, if at a bar there was only one outlet, it was very important that I would be able to charge all of my electronics at once, as well as my girlfriend's. So she could put in her charger over here, and it also has 4 USB ports, as well as 1 Type-C port. So I could plug in everything, like my power bank, my phone, her power bank, just from this like one thing. So you definitely do need something like this on a through hike, because all of your electronics need to stay charged, unless you're like a survivalist or something, then you don't have any electronics. The next thing that I have here is this fanny pack, which is the Mammut fanny pack, which I've used for a long time, and I'll look into something bigger. This is 2 liters, and for my camera and for my notepads, hand disinfectant, and I don't know, something else, my wallet. Like, this was a bit too small. I do need something larger, so I'll look into that. And also, this thing is pretty heavy. I could like look into some ultralight options. So for my next through hike, I will be getting something lighter than this. One really cool thing that I'm glad that I bought with me was this Peak Designs camera capture clip. It basically goes on the shoulder strap over here or over here, and you just put in your camera over here and it always stays on you. And if you just need to film something very quickly, for instance, if you see a marmot, like bam, bam, I can film a marmot now very easily. Otherwise, I'd have to take it out of my backpack basically, or fanny pack. So this was very useful and I will be using it in the future as well. I did bring a GoPro, which is pretty heavy. It's like 200 or 300 grams, and I have mixed feelings about it. I think I probably won't be bringing it on my next through hike. Like, it is useful to get these first-person shots and shots in water. Like in my video series, basically I had a few shots where I was swimming underneath water. This thing is waterproof. I had a few shots where I was filming in rain. Like, I couldn't film with my regular camera, which I'm filming on right now. And also it was very useful to just put in a pocket, and you can film like first-person shots where you have to use like your both hands, which are pretty dangerous. In my opinion, those shots were pretty interesting. So I don't know, maybe I will be bringing it, maybe not. One thing that I don't have with me right now, but I did on my through hike, is my wired headphones. And let me tell you, I was very, very, very happy that I did bring them with me, because they're useful for two things. The first thing is if you want to like isolate all the background noises. For instance, you're staying in a dorm room with like 10 people snoring around you, then your headphones will save you because you will have good sleep. And another thing is like music. I downloaded a Spotify playlist offline, and I remember that I have it only like 3 weeks into the hike. And when I first put them on, like, I left them basically in my ears for the whole day, and I was like, I had so much energy. I was very happy that I found out that I had music. So that's something that I think you should bring on your through hike. They don't weigh anything and they don't take up any space. And lastly, I want to talk about my tripod. So I have a carbon fiber tripod, but it's still pretty heavy. I think it's 1.4 kilograms or something, 1.6. That's a lot, and I could definitely save a lot of weight on that. I don't want to bring the smaller GorillaPod because you wouldn't be able to film such good shots with it. Like, it would be very hard to set up a shot, and I would honestly probably just use my camera much less with that. So I want to look into like a big tripod, which is much lighter, probably from carbon fiber as well. And I think I will be able to save like 500 or possibly 1 kilogram there, but I don't know. I would say that my setup was pretty good. Like, it wasn't the lightest setup that I saw, but from like all the people that I hiked with, I was in like top 10 or 20%, like in terms of ultralight gear. Like, you know, on the internet, you think that everyone has the lightest possible gear, but in reality, no. Like, people were hiking with 20, even 25 kilograms, like, for the whole setup. Mine was like 13 to 15 kilograms in total, with the whole food, with water, with everything. Like, so what I'm saying is, you don't need to stress that much about how much your gear weighs, but at the same time, after finishing this hike, I do want lighter gear. Like, I want to go even more into ultralight, but I understand that it's not that important. It doesn't make sense, but it does make sense for me. So yeah, and on my next setup, I'm looking to save at least like 2 or 3 kilograms. And I can do that. I think I can do that fairly easily by switching to a new backpack, a foam sleeping pad, a new tripod, and all kinds of other changes, and I think I will be able to save some weight. So yeah, that was basically all I wanted to say. And for my next through hike, I still don't know where I'll be going, but like, this was just my first through hike, and I'll definitely be doing similar through hikes in the future. Probably not in Spain, at least my next one. Maybe in Italy, maybe I'm thinking Austria, maybe Norway even, or Sweden. Who knows? So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. But only if you subscribed. Bye.